allowing me to be here today. Alex was like, you don't need to say tech team too, but it's great to have these types of organizations in the community because they really actually do help in the sales funnel process. And there's going to be part of, it's going to be part of what I'm going to be talking about today as well. So my name is Helen. I work for PortfolioHiWay. It's an investment dealer in Canada. We're a digital investment dealer. Our client base is family offices mainly. But before this, as Alex mentioned, I was at Wealthsimple, and before that, another private investment dealer that created sort of online investing, fractional trading, and so forth. So over the 20 plus years, finance has always been part of my life, but also the technology component of things, and also trying to convince the B2B or the B2C that part of the innovation that could help their lives be better and trying to convince them of such things. But I would say the environment now is so much, is so much more open to technology than what it was, I would say, 15 years ago. 15 years ago, you had to be a main incumbent. If you weren't Adobe, if you weren't Microsoft, people didn't necessarily want to hear from you. But now there's so many startups. Wealthsimple was one. It started small and it grew bigger. So, there's a chance for all of the startups here as well. And it always makes me excited for Canadian tech. So one of the questions, I guess, that usually I hear a lot is where to engage your potential customers. And I would say, go where your customers go. It doesn't necessarily need to be in their office, but it could be a conference. It could be a TechTO event. I had a question earlier today, somebody that was in, I guess, maybe protein sales, like protein shakes and so forth, and we were joking around, so we're saying, conferences and so forth, and he's like, maybe, but not the library. And I'm like, no, actually the library, because if there's a book signing about health, you want to be there. You want to be where your customers' customers are. You want to be where your customers' vendors are. And part of the reason is also to network. And you're not necessarily meeting the people to do your sales pitch, but you're there to meet people to understand the industry that you are trying to problem solve for. So being where your customers are will help you engage with them in that sense and trying to understand the industry that you're trying to sell for as well. I get this question quite a bit as well. Should your team role play? And I would say it's not for everyone, especially the more seasoned salespeople. They generally don't want to do it. However, role-playing can help with honing in, making your presentation, your pitch, more concise, more clear. If you can actually bring in third parties into that presentation, trusted third parties or other stakeholders, that can help with the feedback, especially if they provide honest feedback. If it's just the sales team and your boss, the sales team's not going to tell the boss that, they're talking, they're like really quiet and it's not as interesting. That's not going to happen. So you got to bring in some of the stakeholders into that meeting. And it also can help flesh out emotional questions. And what do I mean by that? Questions that invoke an emotion, especially if you're a creator or founder of a product, and they ask you questions about your product in a way that's not always nice or in a way that you might necessarily understand, and it can invoke an emotion in you, but you don't want that to happen in the sales meeting. So you want to practice your pitch, practice how you respond to those hard types of questions. So that's one of the benefits of role-playing as well. And I guess in my industry, in finance, there's a lot of due diligence that happens, either for vendors that we take on, so we are a client of another vendor, a tech vendor or whatnot, or if we're trying to pitch some of our software, because we have software as well, to other companies. And it's vendor outsourcing and due diligence from the eyes of your customers. And what do I mean by that? Well, depending on your customer, especially if they're institutionalized or bank rate or whatnot, they have boxes that they need to check. So they will ask you a series of questions. Usually, it'll be either sort of regulated guidance. So for instance, OFC will have a guideline as to things to cover in their questionnaire. So if you're marketing to those types, if those are your customers, you want to look at those guidelines because you want to be prepared for them. Or at least you want to have it ready for your own pitch deck. And the outsourcing due diligence could be questions around your company makeup. Where do you do business? Who are your key people? What's your business continuity plan? Have you had audits done? A series of those depending on the sector itself. But you want to do some research, and feel free to talk to me later. If you're selling to the financial side of the services, happy to share, spreadsheets or whatnot. Checklists of normal questions to prepare for. You can probably find some of them on the internet as well today. Everything in ChatGPT is really great when it's like not hallucinating, but generally it's going to give you the right answer. But you do want to kind of prepare those and understand that the customer needs to, especially if they're more of an institutionalized customer, like bigger organization, they need to show their bosses that they've done due diligence, that they've helped mitigate the risk. And they do know that if you're a startup company, that you may not have that SOC 2 report. They'll ask the question, so don't be afraid to say, it's something that we're considering, it's something that we don't have, but just your knowledge of those reports and what they represent brings comfort to the institution. And a lot of times, once a sale is made, the institution will pay for that SOC report because they want you as that business. So that's something later. It gets tacked onto the bill later. We're usually fine by it because we really want the service. So little tip there that they don't always tell you. RFI, RFQ, RFP, what are these things? Request for information, request for quote. Before, simple, we used to be like, RFP, what is that? Request for price? What are we going to price this as? Request for proposal, but they're all the same. They're basically spreadsheets upon spreadsheets of information. It's tied into the due diligence, but they help the company basically compare you potentially with other vendors to put you onto the short list. So my advice would be, yes, they are a pain in the butt to do, but having an example ready can help you move faster with your next customer. Having those questions answered will help you respond to your customer and show strength. So they're tedious to do. I've had banks tell me that they've had their AI engine run through it, but it still doesn't answer accurately. It still kind of needs that human touch. So who knows? Time will tell with ChatGPT 5. But do try to either find samples of them, or if you do get invited to do them, is to go ahead and do the exercise, keep copies of them, and don't be discouraged if you have to answer, and this happened at one of the firms I was at. If you start to answer, no, we don't have that feature, or we're planning to build that feature, it can get very discouraging because you're like, well, we don't have anything that they want, but other customers that they're talking to may also not have what they're looking for. And a lot of the times you can psych yourself out to think that you're not in the contending role. So try to answer truthfully. You don't want to lie on those things, but you do want to be ready and prepared. Now, they might also ask you questions that are more sensitive. They might ask you for your revenues, copies of your audit. It is okay to say can be provided with an NDA or whatnot. So do think that over, talk with your team. If you do have legal, talk to them. If you don't have legal, then talk to others in the community to see what they normally do, or get a copy, a coin copy of an NDA. But it is okay not to just give up, because you kind of want to give the information, but you don't want to hold anything back. So you may not be willing to share everything right off the bat, especially if you're a private company. You may not necessarily be sharing your sales and your revenues. Sometimes it is okay to say, private company, this information is private. So, and when you're an institution and you ask that information, and someone answers that way, you're not really expecting necessarily an answer back. Or you'll offer an NDA. You say, we really need to know that piece of information. Can we put in a mutual NDA together? NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. Can we put that in together so that we can share the information? Past challenges and experiences. I'll say a couple examples that I can share, and you guys can bother me more for more examples. But I would say, for me, the salespeople have the best grit. They have to do their homework. They have to do the prep. The sales funnel, especially for technology, can be long, as John has said. Out of 100 contacts, you may get one that comes through, Or let's say you might get 5 that come through as return calls. And out of those 5, you might get actually 1 that you get a meeting for. But it's good to sort of map out your sales funnel, because then you can show your stakeholders what your progress is. Because for people that are not part of the sales process, they're just like, well, when's your next sale? When's your next meeting? Like, what are you doing? You're like, I'm working so hard. So showing that process can help your stakeholders understand where you are at in the process. And just, I guess, a couple of stories. We used to have sort of like this investment educational software that we would sell. My boss at the time was the creator of it, and we used to get quite a bit of meetings. We were in the Global Mail a lot for doing quotes, so we'd get a lot of traction from there. But one thing that used to happen, because obviously we didn't role play, was people would say, well, for that piece of the software, especially the education, can we get that part for free? Because that's normal now, but back then, I would say 15 years ago, free was not like a thing. And my boss, he took it very personally, he would get mad. He would raise his voice in the sales meeting. Sometimes he actually would stand up and tower over his table. So definitely don't do that. What I did start doing as a junior is I would prep the sales meeting call. So if we had a call coming up or we had a presentation coming up, I would say, by the way, the creator is going to be coming. So you can ask him loads of questions, but just whatever you do, just don't say the word free. He doesn't want to give it up for free, but we can negotiate after. So that actually ended up helping. So that's one tip there, that sometimes you do need to manage the relationship between, you don't necessarily always have full control of the sales team that you're on, and you may need to manage that relationship. And then the final example that I'll share with you, one of my more favorites one, is when you inspire the team to innovate, when you place in them to try to ask the customers to solve their pain points for them, to make their lives easier, and when they relate and discuss with the potential customers what those things may be, the discussion is like limitless. We should say the sky's the limit, because there is the back and forth that happens, and it actually can help create like a feedback loop for your own company of use cases that you may have not thought of for your own product or service. So if you inspire your sales team to be innovative, to help problem solve, that can help you with future solutioning as well. And I would say, as a final note, relationships always to build them through. If the sale doesn't happen now, it may happen later. It may happen in a different format. So always, try to come to the events if you can make them. If not, just find other ways that you can network as well. Okay.
Any questions for Helen? Okay, right in the front here. I'll just run this up to you. Perfect.
Thanks for that presentation. And I think I heard you say that you managed to get a client to pay for a SOC 2. So I'm curious about how you manage that and your advice on that. And then also the requests for anything. What advice do you have to the newer companies in the room about what you should keep private and never divulge?
I would say, okay, so for the first question about the SOC 2 and how to get a company to pay for it. If you're a smaller firm, then normally you would get like a quote and say, it's not something that we can necessarily afford now, but we can work together with you. There's a balance too, because you do, depending on the industry that you're in, you may want that first customer, because you rather have the example case. You rather have that story to tell, as John was saying. So between you and the other customer, especially if they're more in the sort of beginner level, like smaller company, you can maybe share that cost. In a larger institution, they generally know that you won't have that, so you say, well, we have these other controls in place. This is how we take care of the other things that you normally would be concerned about in terms of access, whatever it may be, in terms of controlling documents. We have it sort of audible in this way, but if you would want the additional report, then that's an additional cost. So it becomes a negotiation back and forth. But for larger institutions, like that has happened before because they know they need you for your technology. They're not going to be able to do it. Is it really going to come down to the SOC, right? That's not your area of business, right? So for them, that's just something that's, you know, the 50,000 or whatever it might be. But being prepared to show that you're going to be able to pass the SOC is very important. That's very important as well. For the request for information, I would say keep your cap table very tight. It can come back in other ways, like later on if there needs to be a transaction or something. That's, you know, that's kind of understood that you may not necessarily share that information, but you might need to share for conflict of interest reason, sort of like your top 10%, your largest shareholder. They might need to understand where the influence is coming from. You know, you have a health tech company, oh, well, we're actually owned by Johnson & Johnson, you know, like you might need to, usually it's like anybody that's over 10% or 50% more, you kind of give it at the high level. Everybody else you kind of say sort of under that amount. And usually even then you're like into NDA territory.
Maybe we'll take one more question if there is anyone else. Right there? Okay. All right.
Thank you. And just wanted to know your opinion on the pricings. Like, for example, when for some companies, they don't have standardized pricing of the product, and you are going out to an enterprise, how would you judge, like, at what RFQ, like, what you should quote and what value they are getting? So how do you gauge that?
Good, very good question. Some of it is by competitor research, both from your competitors and from their customers. So just sometimes actually by conference, you can probably say, what is the range that you've been experiencing? So some research on this. Sometimes you do have to potentially pay for a consultant for that information, but it can be difficult. And especially in the beginning days, and especially for the firms that I've been with, it's always been a test. Let's just test this pricing to see what the response is. We may need to lower it, we may need to up it, we might have bitten off more than we can choose. Oh, we're never going to do that again for that price. Like that can happen. So it is a bit of a trial and error that can happen. But you do want to so do the research first as much as you can for your industry, the comparables, and that would help with it. And also, you could sometimes on the institutional side ask for budgeting. So I used to do this when I was a startup, even when Simple was a startup. I'd be like, I'm a startup. Is there a startup price? I'd go to Morningstar and SMB. I'm like, I need a startup price. So they would give me a startup price, actually. There is actually sometimes a startup price. So because they do want you as the customer and they feel like you'll grow together with them and eventually you will get like, you know, the 20 users that some of the other providers have. But for now, you were probably at 1 to 3 users for the first 3 years, right? So sometimes it has to kind of make sense in terms of how many users are being used. I would say even for today, we can probably consider us more institutionalized in terms of what we can afford in technology. But if we're only going to have like a trial 3 users, we'll like negotiate again because it's not like a 50 user type of situation. I hope that helps a little bit. Yeah. I would try to work out the metrics for like your like your engineers. Like if you do have to hire a full-time person, you got to price that in, or else you're gonna go like bankrupt, right? So try to price in like how many full-time people can you share? Are they fractional people? Can you share them amongst other people? Is a bit of a gamble, like that first person, because you want that first customer, maybe you just kind of do half the cost. So that part is tough, I do get it, and you're trying to project the metrics and the sales. But you know, at least if you want to play it more safe, you can try to incubate it a bit, and you'd be like, okay, make it cost at least like that, you know, fractional full-time person at least. So you know, maybe at least we try to break even while we're trying this thing out, type of thing, right? So you can kind of go at it from that angle.
Awesome. Okay, round of applause for Helen. Thank you.